ring the bowl in universal oneness and feel the vibration that unites in love and peace. The pre-lit candle is lighted as a symbol of Christ-like presence in all of us. Now I can tell you, my name is Jerry, and welcome to everyone here. So happy to see everyone here. Beautiful day, a little bit, but I got to tell you that last week I was gone because I had a family reunion, and you all know it was 95 plus all week until Saturday. It was 80 something. And the good Lord did that just for us. Because we got a lot of old people out there. Everyone please mute your phones or turn them off. Ask all, read with me in the bulletin, mission for universal oneness. The Center for Universal Oneness is a place where those who want support on their spiritual journey may join others for mutual encouragement, inspiration, and guidance. The Center draws on those practices based in new thought and metaphysical approaches. The higher Christ consciousness provides the foundation. We strive to live in the oneness of love. And our vision statement, extending into the world faith, love, peace, and joy. Lord, would you please open us up with prayer?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Let's join in prayer. Father, Mother God, we welcome this day while we're here in the midst of our friends and loved ones. We welcome the peace and joy that comes with the light shining through each and every one of us. We hold that vision for today, for tomorrow, and for all of our time. And we say thank you, God. Amen.
We welcome John Hardesty and Lori Hall, who will be providing us with wonderful music, as always. Thank you very much.
You think I'm going to tell you? Oh, good morning, Center for Universal Oneness. It is so good to be here. I've missed all of you. It's so nice for you to ask me back to sing. And I get to sing with John Hardesty. And you know what's even better than that?
We get to listen.
You all get to sing with John Hardesty, so stand up. And it's not here we are, it's here we stand, if you're so willing and able. So the lyrics are on the back. Here we go. Here we stand this morning, everyone, God's family, brothers, sisters, we have come. Hearts and minds are open, voices sing, God's glory working wonders in our lives. All right, let's get those hands going. We have come to be together. We have come to be renewed. We have come to be a light in the world. We have come to stand united. We have come to stand in truth. We have come to stand in the presence of God.
I could not have done it any better. That was very good. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you for the mic.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, our speaker this morning is a young lady who has been raised in new thought. She is a leader as a leadership spiritual coach throughout the movement. She is also a life coach, known by her tribe as the Bliss Mentor. She's been with us a couple of times before. Please welcome again Miss Cyndi Swall. Yeah.
I've been called worse. Can I take this out? Is that okay?
Sure.
No, you can't touch the mics.
I got standing still issues, let me just say. You guys know that by now. This is a really good day. I always worry about Lori having a good time.
As well you should work.
I do. No, this is a good day, right?
It is.
I'm here. I hate to say this out loud, but I was in Salem, Oregon all week where it was like 66 degrees. I'm so sorry. And I get to go out on the boat with Mickey later, my bestie. Dan is back. I'm having a reasonably good hair day. So it's a pretty good day. So I'm here to challenge your thinking, actually, about a topic that's near and dear to our hearts, and that is chaos. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Anybody feeling the pain? Just a little bit? And I promise I'm not going to tell you for every cloud there's a silver lining, or for every door that closes another one opens, or one day you'll look back on this and just laugh, it'll be fine. But you know what's really interesting to me, though, when I start to think about chaos, I read a book recently by Robert Brummett. Has anybody read Birthing a Greater Reality? It's a really great book. So if you have an opportunity to take a look at it. But that's where I first heard the concept of dancing with chaos. And I remember thinking it was a little bit of a dichotomy for me, because I thought, when I think about dancing, what images does it conjure up for you when you think about dancing?
Fine.
Look, she's like in it already. Yeah, so it's like joy, right? And celebration and intimacy and all of those things. So to me, it was a little bit of a disconnect how you could use dancing and chaos in the same sentence. So what I realized is that I'm going to have to challenge my own thinking about how I'm defining chaos, or how we in Western civilization define chaos. And so I did what I do, which I looked it up in the Webster's Dictionary, the online dictionary, of course, because does anyone really have a dictionary?
Yeah.
You do? Is it propping open a window? No? Oh, you use it. Okay. So anyway, my online dictionary. So here's the definitions. So there was a couple of different definitions. I'm going to read them to you. The first one is, this won't surprise you. The first one is a state of utter confusion in a given situation. Isn't that pretty much how we would define chaos? Right, so here's the second one, though. You're going to love this. Number 2, the confused state of primordial matter before the creation of distinct forms.
I was going to say that.
I'll just say it again for clarity. The confused state of primordial matter before the creation of distinct forms. She said. So think about it. So I'm going to take you back to 8th grade Greek mythology for just a minute. Okay, so think back. Everybody remember that, right? So, but think back though. So chaos was described in mythology as the original dark void. It was kind of that divine condition from which everything appeared. And you notice it doesn't say from which adversity appeared. It says from which everything appeared. So when you think about it, the first 2 things to come out of chaos in Greek mythology were Gaia and Eros. Anybody remember who Gaia is? Say again? Earth. Yeah, Mother Earth or Mother Nature. And so the second thing to come out of chaos was Eros, who was the Greek deity of erotic love. What's not to like about that, right? So when you think of it, though, the 2 basic derivatives that came out of chaos were the 2 areas that have the capacity for the greatest expansion that exists. Nature, human desire. Isn't that interesting? So the point that I think that we're getting to here is that chaos is really the point from which creation happens. And what we know in New Thought is that we create our experiences with our thinking, don't we? So if in fact that's the case, nothing comes to you already in order, does it? Nothing does. This is the free will part that we keep talking about. And so it doesn't come to us in order. So I think those of you who follow Abraham Hicks at all, one of the things that they talk about is the concept of the contrast. Basically meaning it's impossible for us to know what it is that we truly desire until we've seen what it is that we don't want. True? So anybody who's ever been married once before knows that, right? So before you get married, you have this laundry list of stuff you want, and after you've been married once and divorced, you're like, now you know what you don't want, and you look for that first. Okay. It's like, I know what my deal breakers are now. So that's kind of how chaos is, right? So we all have our own Phoenix from the ashes stories, don't we? Whatever that looks like, whether it's a death or divorce or losing a job or an illness that we've overcome, we all have those things. And so what we learn over time is to take a look at those things not as deal breakers, but as just a data point, just a snapshot in time, to be able to say, this is a piece of information that's going to inform where I'm going with this chaos. So for the sake of today's message, I'm going to define chaos. I'm going to break it into 3 categories for us, okay? The first one is going to be what I call external chaos. Now, external chaos is kind of like the global issues that are going on, perhaps right now, that are coming up for people that we may feel like we have either little or no control over, or that we've had very little to do with actually instigating. So we just kind of happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So that's one. Number 2 is what I call iceberg chaos. What's a characteristic of an iceberg?
Cold.
It is cold, yes. It's unmoving.
A lot of it's hidden.
Yeah, the biggest majority of the iceberg is actually beneath the surface. So we have to talk about iceberg chaos are those things that we create in our lives over and over and over and over again, because those are really derivatives of our core underlying beliefs about how we think the world operates or how we think the world should operate. So those are the experiences with iceberg chaos. And then finally, my personal favorite, what I call intentional chaos. Shaking things up in the status quo intentionally. And some of you are looking at me like, why? Why would I do that? All right, so this is the one that's really more of a reaching out concept. So hold that thought with me for a little bit. It's kind of like the caterpillar and the chrysalis, if you will. Does anybody know the story of what actually happens to a caterpillar? I think we've had this conversation before.
It disintegrates.
Yeah, it literally like disintegrates into like a gelatinous goo, right? Before it actually becomes a butterfly. So it literally has to completely break down. It's not even a caterpillar anymore. And so where we get struggling a little bit is that sometimes we are living in the goo, aren't we? When we're living in the goo, we can't always see the beauty that is about to emerge from the chrysalis. And so, but that's why, and when we start talking about change, we'll talk more specifically about that as we start to move through it. So let's talk about external chaos first, because when we talk about external chaos, this is probably the one that creates the greatest amount of stress for people. Why do you think that is? Yeah, because we feel like we have absolutely no control over it. The ego really struggles with the concept of not having control. And quite frankly, our society not having control over a situation is just not valued. All right, but I want you to think about it. I want you to understand that there is really no circumstance that you will ever be in anywhere in your lifetime that you absolutely have zero control. Because you always have control over something, don't you? I want you to think about like worst case scenario. Think about people who have been in like prisoners of war or concentration camps, and the ones that are able to come out and live functioning lives. Think about the situations when they have conversations with them. They interview them when they get out, and they say, you know, talk to us about how you were able to survive a situation like that. What do you think is the one thing they have one element of control over? Exactly, their mind, their thinking. It's like you can take my clothing, you can take my food, you can take my dignity, but you cannot tell me what to think. And so at some juncture, it's important for us to understand while all of this crap is going on around us, we can choose to play, or we can choose to think a new thought. If anybody's been on social media anytime in the last 2 years, knows that you can find evidence to support whatever you want. Right? It's true. So when we start thinking about external chaos, we have to look at that. And so we need to understand that even sometimes the smallest gestures can completely shift where it is that we're going. So in Brummett's book, he talks about the butterfly effect. Do we have any pilots in the room? The butterfly effect, also known as the chaos theory. So does anybody know what the chaos theory is?
Butterfly effect basically says butterfly in the Amazon rainforest flaps its wings and affects one thing, which affects something else, and affects the entire world.
Exactly. So when you think about it, because weather is such a chaotic system anyway, is that you can literally have like perfect measurements on all four corners of the planet on everything around, like wind velocity and barometric pressure and temperature and all of those things. But if you have not factored in a butterfly flapping its wings in the Amazon, can actually cause an unprecedented storm in New York City. Isn't that crazy? Which is why you can never believe anything the weatherman says. It's a total guesswork. It's like, we think this is what's going to happen. So when you're reporting the weather, they're basically looking at, here are the conditions the way we see it right now. Don't hold me to this, right? So that's really what weather looks like. So that's the idea of the butterfly effect. And the reason that this is important from an external chaos perspective is that the theory shows us that there's kind of a hidden order of things, doesn't it? And if we are willing to not fight it, but dance with chaos, then we can set ourselves up to have levels of success that are completely unpredicted from that perspective. So let's talk about the iceberg chaos. What's the definition of insanity?
Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Exactly. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting something different to happen. So when you think about it from the perspective of the iceberg chaos, chaos often shows up as what I would call repetitive stress patterns, right? It's like an external manifestation. Think of it as like pouring concrete. Your belief systems, by the way, where do we get our belief systems? Where do we get our beliefs?
From others.
Yeah, I mean, some of it from way back when we were really, really small. If you ever question that, it's like go into a third grade classroom and ask them who they're voting for president. Who are they voting for? Whoever their parents are voting for, right? And so at no juncture, when we're adult people, do we come into adulthood and start to challenge our thinking. We just assume things to be true because that's what we've been taught. And so now we have an opportunity to stop and start to take a look at how we really believe about things. Are your beliefs true?
Could be.
Who knows?
Maybe. And the reality is maybe they're true for you, but they may not be true for somebody else. You have beliefs that serve you. Maybe you have a belief that is, I always land on my feet. I'm a survivor. That's a pretty decent belief to carry into life with you, right? But think about some of the beliefs, though, that you've been carrying around for a long time that may not serve you anymore. I worked with an executive several years ago in a director development program, and he was like a high potential guy, right? And so he was really hard worker, he was really smart. 3 or 4 times, though, year after year, he kept getting passed over for a promotion. And he didn't understand that because his dad told him, if you work really hard, you'll be successful. And this guy worked really hard. But his dad's dad told him that. If you work really hard, will you be successful? It doesn't hurt, but it's certainly no guarantee. Do you know people who work really hard that are not successful?
Yeah.
Of course we do. Or people that don't work at all that are wildly successful?
Yes.
The Kardashians? I'm all about it though, you know. I can't say that in front of my daughter because she loves the Kardashians. All right, so, but when you're pouring concrete, when you think about it, what starts to happen, similar to our belief systems, is that actually it's like your beliefs will take on whatever mold you create for that, and if you let it sit there long enough, it will create a right hearty foundation for you to build your experiences on. And so as we start telling that same story over and over and over again, then it continues to become our experience, doesn't it? Albert Einstein says, you can tell the overall quality of a man's life by how he answers one question. And that question is this a friendly universe? Is this a friendly universe?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, because if you get up in the morning and you think it's just you against the world, you are going to be pushing a chain uphill every single day. Everything is going to be hard for you. But if you get up with the knowing that you came here to the planet with every resource you need to be successful, and that the universe is here to support you, the stars will align, won't they? You take one step towards your vision and the right people show up in your life. We've seen this happen, haven't we? Over and over and over again. So is this a friendly universe? So, yes, it is. So we were taught in school, I'm going to take you back to 8th grade again. I'm sorry. 8th grade, maybe 7th grade. Okay, so we were taught a long time ago that for every action, there's a reaction. And that's partially the truth. So A equals C. Adversity equals consequence. But the problem is there's a component of that that is clearly missing. Because if that were true, if for every action or every adversity there's a consequence, that would mean when any one of us had an adversity, we'd all have the same consequence. Do we all have the same consequence? No. Of course we don't, right? And so when we start having conversations like that, we have to start to take a look at that equation again and say, okay, what's the missing piece here? And the missing piece is that it's really A plus B equals C, which is the adversity plus your belief about that adversity that really becomes your consequence, doesn't it? So that's the equation that we look at when we start looking at iceberg chaos. In the New Earth, anybody read the New Earth? Eckhart Tolle? Yeah, so that was a little more popular. So Eckhart Tolle talks about how the normal state of the average human is a chronic state of dysfunction. Guilty. It's the chronic state of dysfunction, right? So when you think about that, if that is in fact our normal state of mind for most people, and actually Eckhart Tolle calls this original sin. So the first time I ever walked into a New Thought church, I was 11 years old. And I remember there was a gentleman by the name of Rocco Errico that was speaking. Has anybody ever heard Rocco? If you get the opportunity, he's fantastic. He's still a speaker, which by the way, I'm friends with him on Facebook and he looks great. He's gotta be 100. He's gotta be. Because, I mean, I was 11 at the time and he was probably in his 30s, but he's still phenomenal. But he's a biblical scholar is who he is, but he's also Aramaic. And so he was telling the story about how, first of all, how things meant completely different things back then than they do now, and how from a language standpoint, Aramaic doesn't even translate literally into English. So we're guessing at best anyway. So when it comes to biblical theology. And then secondly, if words meant something completely different, does anybody know what the word sin meant during that period of time? Yeah, it was an archery term. It meant to miss the mark. Miss the mark, which basically means you missed the mark. Try again, right? Which is very different than how we were taught what sin actually is, isn't it? In fact, this is the way he defines it. I'm going to read it because it's really good. Tolle says that true sin is to live, am I too loud? I'll move it out a little bit. The word sin is an archery term, and we talked about that. Tolle says that true sin is to live unskillfully, blindly trapped in our habitual patterns. Whoa, hello. Got it? Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll try again. Tolle says that true sin is to live unskillfully, blindly trapped in our habitual patterns of thinking, thus causing ourselves and others to suffer unnecessarily. That's the definition of sin. Dr. Andrew Chate from the Resilience Factor calls this catastrophizing. How we take a fairly simple, non-threatening concept and we make it so much bigger than it needs to be. Anybody ever guilty of that? You know, that downward spiral that we go on. Once again, in the executive world, I went through a big layoff when I was working with a vice president. And he was talking about how he was kind of at risk. They had given him plenty of notice, so he had like 6 months to find another job. But still, he's thinking to himself, and we're going through this conversation, he said, I can't lose my job. He said, we just built this monstrous house, and he said, if we lose this house, my wife loves this house, and she will definitely divorce me if we lose this house. And if my wife divorces me, then I'm never gonna see my kids again. And if I never see my kids again, do you see this spiral? Next thing you know, he's like living in a cardboard box behind Walmart, right? Because he's already got like this whole thing in his head as far as how this is gonna unfold. And so we start to tell these stories of chaos around exactly what's happening. So as we keep that in mind, we have to understand that when we examine chaos in our lives, we have to kind of discern how much of this is actually self-inflicted. Remember the comic strip Pogo? We have met the enemy, and he is and he is us. So we're always self-inflicting chaos into our lives. Okay, finally, my favorite. We're going to talk about intentional chaos. Normally when you think of resilience, how would you define it?
Falling down and getting back up.
Yeah, falling down, getting back up. What else? Yeah, bouncing back, coming back after adversity, adapting, like navigating the day-to-day stuff throughout the course of life. All those things are true, by the way. There's also an element of resilience that they don't tell you about, and that's called reaching out. People who are highly resilient reach outside the walls of their own head. They reach out for help when they need help. They reach out for new ideas besides the ones that they already have. They network with other people. They're constantly looking at what the other guy is doing so that they can benchmark. So people who are resilient do a lot of reaching out. So this is when we talk about actually creating change for the purposes of making your life better than it was before. And I will tell you, as a coach, there are very few people that are willing to do this. Right, Mickey? Right. It's like anybody can do it, but I bet you it's less than 20% of the population that's willing to shake stuff up just to enhance their life in some way. And the reason for that is because we traditionally really resist change. So traditionally we resist change, though, because change is almost always something that we are responding to, and it's not usually very pretty, right? So our ego fights change because it's not our idea. And so the whole idea of like changing on purpose really wigs people out a little bit. So we have to talk about intentional change here because my experience is that people don't think it's because I'm getting too close to this, is that what's happening? Okay, so I'll stay over here just a little bit. So our perception is that change is stressful and that it's something to be avoided because it usually feels like we're out of control. And remember, once again, not being in control of a situation is not valued in our society. It makes the ego very, very uncomfortable when that happens. So having been born and raised in the Kansas City area, Kansas City for a long time, particularly way back in the gold rush days, was used to be known as the city of cowards. Anybody heard that before? Yeah, that's not personally been my experience, but when you think back to it, during the gold rush days, remember Kansas City was the last stop at the end of this California Santa Fe Oregon Trail. And so as a result of that, this is like, we were the last actual township that there was before you moved into the Badlands. And so what started to happen is that people would come into Kansas City and they would start to take a look at the dangers that were ahead of them, because people would starve, and they would run across, into enemy territory. They would fall into illness. They have the Rocky Mountains to go through in a covered wagon, right? So when you think about the obstacles that lay ahead of them, a lot of times people would get as far as Kansas City and they would look ahead at what was ahead of them and they'd go, I'm good. This is a nice little town. And so people would just homestead in Kansas City because they were afraid to move forward. And so it made me stop and think, and a historian friend of mine was telling me this story and I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. But it makes me really stop and think about what was the thinking, the belief systems of the people who got back in that wagon and headed to California. Because they had to have a completely different take on stuff than the people who decided to homestead. Now, this doesn't make anybody wrong, but it's definitely a different belief. And more importantly, the people that actually made it to California and got wealthy in the gold rush. So being from the city of cowards has given me a little bit of insight, because even though it is really natural, it kind of scares us to death to reach out and make stuff happen and to make things change, because we think to ourselves, well, what if where I'm going is not as good as where I am? Or what if I fail? What if I get hurt? So we ask ourselves all of those questions and we start to anticipate the worst possible scenario. In fact, Brene Brown goes as far as to say that we dress rehearse tragedy. We dress rehearse tragedy so that then when it happens, we're not disappointed. Isn't that insane? I'm sorry, that is twisted. But we do that. We do that because there's some kind of like warped satisfaction that comes from failing and going, see, I told you that was going to happen. That's part of the manifestation cycle, is that we actually, it's like the way in which the stories we tell, the thoughts that we have and the stories we tell around that actually evoke an emotion in us, don't they? And what we know from manifestation is, what is the point of power? The point of power is where? in the emotion, right? It's in the feeling, right? So whatever it is that you're feeling determines what actions that you take. And so we start that cycle all over and over again. So if you have a belief system that life is unfair and that there are challenges ahead of you, and that's the way you talk about it, how are you feeling? Worried, beat up, hopeless, depressed. Oh, there's so many words to describe how you're feeling at that moment. If you're feeling hopeless and depressed and sad and scared and all of those things, what actions are you taking? Probably none. And the actions you are taking are from a place of fear. What do we know about taking action from a place of fear? Like, there's no way not to propagate those same things. So then on the manifestation cycle, we go, see, I told you life's not fair. So things don't work out the way you think they should, and so it just repopulates that cycle again. So from an intentional chaos standpoint, part of what we have to do is to understand that that chaos that's self-inflicted in a positive way actually gets us where we want to go. All right? So how many know how the mother eagle creates her nest? Where does an eagle perch, by the way? Yeah, way, way up in the cliffs. And so they perch so high up in the cliffs, and so what the mama eagle knows is that once those baby eaglets are big enough to fly, they're going to look over that cliff and go, I don't know about this. Right? So she knows from the very beginning that a mother eagle, before she lays her eggs, will actually create that nest out of like thickets and thorn and glass and anything uncomfortable that she can build, and then she starts to pad it with cotton and grass and some of those other things so that the eggs will be safe. And then once the eaglets are big enough, and if they are not flying out of the nest on their own, guess what she does? A little bit at a time, she starts to pull some of that padding out of the nest. My daughter's 20, so I'm working on this myself, actually. So, it would sound a little bit sadistic, but the reality is she knows if those baby eagles stay in that nest, they will die there. They can't stay there. And so a little bit at a time, she'll start pulling some of that padding out of the nest to the point that it becomes so painful to stay there that they have to fly. Isn't that interesting? It's so painful. How many times are we that baby bird? That we wait until it is so painful that we have to do something else before we take action. Intentional chaos is the most important thing we can do for ourselves. We have to start pulling some of that padding out a little bit at a time so that we can fight the cultural bias that we have that change is painful and it's out of control. You are not meant to live a life of mediocrity. You're not here to play small. Can I hear an amen? Amen. Amen. Francis Ford Coppola once said that anything that you do with intense passion invites chaos. Anything that you do with intense passion invites chaos. And with that, I say, let the dance begin. Thank you for letting me spend my morning with you.
Let us take these thoughts into meditation. Empty your laps and your hands. Sit straight in your chair, feet flat on the floor. Let the chair hold your weight, spine straight. And when you're comfortable, close your eyes and go within. Paying attention to your breathing. Breathing deeper, slower. Letting go of any tension or tightness that you may be feeling in your body.
letting go of the chatter of your mind, being here now, within. Centering your heart and mind into the presence of the divine. You're safe, you're secure within the presence. Notice how easy it is to breathe. We normally don't even have to think about it. We are surrounded by all the air and oxygen that we need constantly. And we are also surrounded continually by the presence of God. The energy of life. Notice when you go inside the silence, you have everything you need to be one with the one that we know and love. Within the Spirit, we are one. Within this life, we live with the one. We experience the love of the divine and we extend it into the world because we can. And because we know that everything we give, we receive, and that giving and receiving are the same. And through the peace and love of the presence and power of God, we know joy, we know light, and we know the divine order that is always with us. And we are so grateful. So breathe. Breathe in the air that's always available. Feel the energy that you have at your disposal at every moment. Experience the safety and quiet of peace. And know that the love of God surrounds us, is within us, and expressed by who we are. And now begin to come back to this time, this place, feeling refreshed and alert.
Let's stay in the calm right now, in the calm from the chaos. And if you are led to join me, the words are in your bulletin, when I pray. Let's keep the lights, Bill. Let's keep the lights off. And if you are still wanting to be silent vocally, and just listen to the prayerful song, it's your choice. When I pray. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. Soul. When I pray, I feel my soul go deeper, my soul go deeper into my God. When I pray, I feel my soul go deeper, my soul go deeper into my God. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. Love. When I pray, I feel my love go deeper, my love go deeper into my God. When I pray, I feel my love go deeper, my love go deeper into my God. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray.
very much, John, Lori, Cyndi as well. Thank you so much for the wonderful message. It's now time for the offering.